Welcome to the good, the bad, and the sequel Q&A. My name's Doug. So the next sequel that we're covering is The Muppets Wizard of Oz. We're finally going to do a Muppet sequel, which should be a lot of fun, but not as fun as this week's interview with costume designer Katie Irish. It was so cool because when I started this podcast, me and Jamie, I told them, I want to talk to everyone who works behind the scenes. And we've reached out to everyone. Finally got someone who works in the costume department. It was so neat. We talked about Katie's journey from Memphis, Tennessee. I told her that I loved the song Walking in Memphis. Why not? That's got to be annoying. I guess people, if they're from New York, oh yeah, I love Sinatra's New York, New York, or I don't know any Jersey songs, but you know what I mean. So we talked about her journey from Memphis to NYU, working on Broadway. She worked on Spider-Man, which is a really wild story. The Muppets Wizard of Oz. She was a costume assistant there. Has some great stories working on that. She also worked on Movie 43, Shrek the Musical. But I love talking to her about the Americans. It's really cool to learn about all the behind the scenes things you don't think of, like a budget, how we're going to find this, for, like she said, really cool thing. I never thought you watch a show that you could tell a stunt's coming. She can, she tells you how. And then also finding some cool, neat jewelry, for the Americans. It's a really cool story. I love, just how things can sometimes come to be. And I'm so happy that I finally spoke to somebody in the costume department to tell me those kind of like, oh, and I looked at this and I got inspired by that. So it's pretty cool to finally talk to somebody. And Katie was great. Before I start the interview, please, if you're new here, subscribe, like us on all social media at Sequels Only. Go on YouTube, follow us there. There'll be an unedited video interview of this. There were some technical difficulties on my end, so it's going to be really wonky when you see me disappear, but I'll cut it so I come right back. It's going to be perfect. So it's going to be slightly edited. It's usually just unedited, slightly edited. I don't want you to just, yeah. I don't want a minute of dead air. We want to give you the best. And so please follow, share, all that fun stuff. And without further ado, here is costume designer Katie Irish. Wow, so you grew up in Memphis.
I did.
So I love the song Walking in Memphis.
It's a great song.
It is a great song.
It's a great piano riff.
And I never realized how far, obviously, you look at maps as a kid, growing up in New Jersey. In New Jersey, you can get anywhere all in a day. If you wanted to.
Yeah.
Other states, it's not like that. We went to Nashville last week, a couple of years ago. And I remember thinking maybe we'll go to Memphis and stop by. And it's nope, not happening. Too far.
No, it's something that when I moved to the Northeast, the fact that I could drive from New York to Maine in 6 hours was insane to me, because getting from one end of the state of Tennessee to the other is 10 and a half hours. It's very long and skinny. So,
yeah. But that must have been interesting. So what led to, obviously, the career path that you took, in costume? What was it when you were growing up in Memphis? Was it watching a movie, going to a play? How did that all begin?
I mean, I was always interested in theater. I started doing school plays in 6th grade, but it was all very much small, non-professional theater where the director or someone's mom, everyone kind of came together to be like, okay, you wear this, you wear this. As I got older, I became involved with Playhouse on the Square, which is a fantastic professional theater in Memphis. But I never had the experience of working with a costume designer there. And so it really was something that I think, like everyone, you're like, I enjoy doing this. I guess I must be an actor.
Yeah.
But no. um, but the other thing is I actually was really into science. When I was looking at colleges, my parents had made a deal with me that if I went to a school that gave me scholarship money, then they would have money to help me with postgraduate work because they
Ah.
thought I was going to med school, because I was interested in research biology. And so I was looking at programs that had both a theater department and a good biology department. And I ended up going to the University of Tulsa because I got a scholarship in theater there, actually. And because of my scholarship, kind of the balance of classes started to weigh more heavily on theater and less in the science world. And then my junior year, I took a costume design course because it was a Bachelor of Arts program. So we had to do everything. And so after I took my costume design course, I kind of had this moment where I was like, this is how I approach things. This makes sense to me. And so from there, I just kept going.
Wow. What are some of the things you study in that course? Is it like looking at classic films and TV, the process? Like, what are you learning in a class like that?
In a costume design course? Well,
Yeah.
in the intro one, there's a lot of paperwork and very technical, not creative aspect to this job. And so one of the first things we did was learn how to break down a script. There's a fantastic textbook called From Page to Stage by Rosemary Ingham. I still have it on my bookshelf. And it really is about going through and figuring out what do you have to show the audience based on what other characters are saying? Is it day? Is it night? It teaches you how really to break the script down for continuity, for character. What do we know about the characters? Do they talk about their clothes? Do we see through their actions that someone is reserved? So maybe a deep cut dress is not going to make the right
Yeah, yeah.
impression. Things like this, it really, and so learning all of that foundation first and then putting it to work using, I think we did The House of Blue Leaves, which is a great play, mid-century, 20th century play. Um, and just using all of those fundamentals that we had learned to really start to put it into action.
Yeah, I think that's the greatest thing about film and TV. There's so many components, obviously, that go into one shot, but I think it's so cool when you can feel something without words being said. Like you mentioned, like you talk to somebody and it's like, oh yeah, she came from the rough side of the tracks. It's like maybe she has like a rip in her jean jacket
Mhm.
or like subtle music sounds. And I think that's so cool. So you could tell so much, and there's so much of it in one scene. It could be something, a poster on the wall, it could be the shirt she's wearing, it could be the type of music or sound that's playing in the background before they even utter words. And I think it's so cool that you could like tell so much in a character with them not even speaking.
I mean, we do this every day when people get dressed, if
Yeah,
you
yeah,
have a seriously, if you've got a big interview or a job you're going out for that day, you dress differently than if you're cleaning the house. Like
totally.
it's taking that and synthesizing it and distilling it down so that way, to your point, before a character even speaks, you know something about them.
And I'm sure, is it difficult for you? This is usually a question, but now that we're kind of talking about it, when you watch, because you've been doing this for years now,
Yeah.
so your eye is to this now. I always ask people in special effects or really all parts of film, is it hard for you to watch things? Do you ever look at something, you're like,
Sometimes.
why is she wearing that shirt?
Well, case in point, I completely ruined the first season of Stranger Things for my husband because we were watching it. And then about three-quarters of the way through, I said, "Uh-oh." And he said, "What?" I was like, "There's a huge stunt sequence coming." And he said, What?" And he's in the business, so he has a very
Really?
trade. Yep. And I
What part of
said,
the business is he in?
he is a producer. He mostly works in advertising, but
Oh, okay.
he's a director and a producer.
Oh, okay.
Um, but he said, "How do you know?" And I said, "This character has been wearing all vintage clothes until now, and now she's wearing modern clothes, which tells me that they needed multiples, which means there's a stunt sequence coming.
That's amazing.
And
That's your
I mean,
parlor trick. I
it's
bet you this sun scene coming. It's like, how would you know this? The movie never was seen before. And it's like, oh, I know. That's
well,
wild.
yeah, I mean, in fairness, this was set at the same time when I was working on The Americans. It was a similar time frame, and I also was up against the trying to use vintage as much as possible. But, there were only a limited number of modern items out there that had an 80s feel. And so I knew, like, I saw the sweater and I was like, I know that sweater.
That's amazing. So back to Memphis. So when you're there, obviously you're working in the theater department doing that. What was that next leap? Was it always TV, film? It-
No, no,
no.
not at all. After I graduated from college at the University of Tulsa, I
Nice.
worked.
That's a good school.
Yes, it
Good
was a great. It
basketball
was
school.
good basketball. We were a great basketball school when I
Yeah.
was there many years ago. We flipped
What's
back and forth.
Oklahoma like? Oklahoma weather versus Tennessee weather. Big
Uh,
difference? No?
it gets a lot colder.
Yeah.
They get more ice. That whole wind sweeping down the plains things is
Oh,
is
yeah.
actually true. For the year after I graduated, I was the resident costume designer and I ran their costume shop. And during that time, I really figured that I needed to go to graduate school because I had only decided that this is what I wanted to do basically a year before graduating.
Yeah.
And At this point, I really was interested in theater, and the pinnacle of theater is Broadway. And so I only applied to NYU for graduate school. I was like, all or nothing.
Yeah.
And I went and I had my interview, and I left my interview thinking there is absolutely no way I got in. Like, if I'm lucky, I got waitlisted, but they don't think I'm ready or anything. And miraculously, I got in. It was conditional. I had drawing homework I had to do every week and
Wow.
mail it in to because it was something that I had not had a proper drawing class since elementary school.
Yeah.
I'd been designing and I did a lot of collage and I could sew, and so I knew how to express my ideas that way, but I was not good at visually getting them on the page. But I got in and I moved to New York and I did my 3-year master's at NYU. And when I got out, like most of us, one of my former professors gave me my first job shopping
Nice.
on White Christmas, which at that point wasn't on Broadway. It was 3 separate city productions, and it was massive. It was the kind of scale I'd never worked on before. Um, but it learned a ton, and I kept working, both as an assistant, and then I worked my way up to an associate designer on Broadway, while also designing my own work regionally for ballets and operas and other theaters and things like that. And I continued on that until about 2013, and that's when I made the switch to film and TV.
Wow. So when you're doing that, like what are the so buyer is like the introduction. So you're going out, they're telling you, "Hey, we need this." What are some of the other levels of the hierarchy of like the costume department?
In theater or in motion
In
picture? Because 'Cause
theater,
they're
I'm sure
different.
there's less people, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, typically there are less. The first position is a PA, which a production assistant, which is
Mhm.
universal across film and television. Um, these people are the backbone of any department, and in the costume department, when I am running it, I typically like to have at least 3. One person is supporting the shoppers, the buyers, who and this person is largely in a minivan, driving around, doing pickups and all of that kind of thing, as well as doing returns. There's one person who is in the office who is helping the coordinator with paperwork and organizing all of our returns. And then that third person is floating, usually doing returns, but also doing other pickups, other things that we need, going back and forth to set, anything like that. From there, and the first union position is a costume department coordinator. And this person is the kind of project manager, I guess, if you were trying to put it into business terms that other
Yeah,
people
yeah, yeah,
outside the
yeah.
industry might get. Um, this person does all the accounting. They don't create the budget, but they do all of the tracking of it. They provide cost reports weekly to the accounting department. They are liaison between you and the transpo department and the wardrobe department, which is separate than costumes. They are the person who does all of the fitting schedules and works with the AD team for that. From the largest thing about like setting up the office, both physically and literally, in terms of like creating what your email address is going to be and your Google Drive
Yeah.
storage, to like actually physically saying, no, we're going to need 16 racks. And like they do all of this. It's a huge job. Um, there are assistant costume designers, and that actually encompasses a ton of different things. As an assistant costume designer, you can be someone who is out in the streets shopping and buying either fabric and notions or, pre-existing clothing.
Yeah.
You can be the online buyer. So you are the person sitting in front of the computer trying to track down those 14 coats that you need to be all identical. You can be someone who works aging and dyeing. So we get brand fresh new clothes, but they need not to look brand new. So you're the person who is doing the craft specific kind of breaking them down. There are roles as a first ACD, which is kind of the costume designer's right hand. That is the person who, for me, is in charge of creating the budget. They work with me doing all of the script breakdowns, and they're basically your clone. So inevitably, when you have to be two places at once, they're in one of them, and you can be in the other. Um, Depending on how big a show is, you could have a first assistant costume designer in charge of principals, and you could have a first in charge of background. In period shows, that's not uncommon at all. You can have someone who is made to order ACD, someone who is just in charge of the clothes that you are building and managing the team of people below them in terms of sourcing all of the fabrics, getting them, all of that kind of thing. Um, and then on top, there's the costume designer.
Who has to manage all of the people and then still
Who
do their job. Yeah.
exactly, exactly, who does
That's
all of
intense
the
too.
other
Would you have
things.
expected that? Obviously, you're in the world now. You've been doing it for a while. So it's kind of common. But did you expect that much went into it? Like when you went from like theater, even just the film, like making that leap?
The pace is really the difference
Yeah.
because in theater, I now it is different now because they actually have just written or won the right to have a coordinator in the live performance contracts for Broadway, which is phenomenal.
Wow.
But in theater, I'm trying to think. I think the biggest theater team that I worked on, there were there was one first ACD and three kind of second ACDs that we all split different roles.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because the jobs are all very similar, but again, it's the pace at which you work, especially in episodic TV.
Yeah. Wow. So your first so just looking at your credits, I know the time you made that big leap was sure like the AGT like movie 43. But like early on like a short film extras, and then on here, how did you get involved with the Muppets? Was
The
that in New
Muppets.
York?
It was.
Oh,
The
that's
Henson
cool.
Mansion was on East 69th Street,
Oh, wow.
and it was actually the last show that or the last movie that they made using that as a home base before it was sold.
Wow, how did I
It was
never
a
know that? There was a whole thing in the city? Like sets and
in
everything? I never knew that.
no, it wasn't shot in the city, but the
Oh,
Henson
okay.
Mansion, that was kind of the production hub. It was shot in Toronto. But that was the production hub and the workshop for
That's
building all
cool.
of the places, all of the friends and their clothes.
Yeah.
Um, my costume shop manager at NYU knew a number of people in that worked at Henson, including Polly Smith, who was the longtime designer for them and who coincidentally also invented the sports bra and was an NYU costume department alum.
Oh, wow.
And
Wow.
so I went to interview, and I was actually interviewing to work as a seamstress there, just sewing and doing that. And I did that, but then in prep, it became clear that Polly needed an assistant. And so I worked with Polly and became her assistant designer in New York before the show actually moved to Toronto for
Wow,
shooting.
that's awesome. What a bit. So I didn't even think of that. So a part of your job I didn't even think about you having to know is sewing. So is that something you knew from growing up? Like, is that something you were good at? Because that seems
No.
difficult. No.
My mom sews really well, and I was one of those kids who was lucky enough that every Halloween, like at the beginning of October, we'd go to the fabric store and we'd pick what we wanted to be for
Oh, wow.
Halloween, and then yeah, and mom we wouldn't leave until mom had all of the fabric and the notions and the thread, all the things. So I grew up watching my mom sew, and she tried to teach me how to sew a couple of times. But since you have kids and I now have kids, I'm sure you understand when you try and teach your own children
Oh, I
something,
know.
they no one
Yeah.
wants to learn that. It takes another adult to teach them.
Exactly. I
Uh,
never wanted to hold the flashlight for my dad with the car.
no,
Never. I'd be
no.
like, Dad, I'm never gonna do this myself. To change your own oil to save $7 or whatever. I remember like doing the math one time in high school and be like, Dad, what are we doing? We're out here for an hour. We could be like doing something fun, but no, 100%. But is that so funny? Like as a kid, you saw that whole process of like going, picking out the
Mhm,
fabric that you wanted, and then
mhm.
she would create it and you would help.
Yeah,
And then that's what you do. Like that's kind of, it's so weird how
yeah.
many things that people, especially in creative arts, like people that I talk to, there's like these moments, even when I talk to them, I'm sure you've thought of that before, but I've talked to some people, they like mention this thing and it's like, oh well, yeah, well, you did that as a kid. Like this guy interviewed Don Deers, he was set director, decorator, art director, and he was telling me like, yeah, me and my brother when we were kids, he's in construction, we used to do these haunted houses and I would design everything. I'm like, so you were kind of doing this like when you were a kid. Like, and then he's like, well, you know what? I never really like put two and two together. We just had fun doing it. But yeah, like 15 years later, you're doing it on a movie set. Wow. So that's cool. The Muppets is, it's a touchdown in most kids' lives, but I'm sure for yourself, that must have been a really cool experience. Yeah.
It was it was amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
I grew up watching The Muppet Show, and the Henson Mansion was everything you would want it to be. Like, when you
Yeah.
walked in, Waldorf and Statler were sitting in the chairs next to you while you were waiting for your appointment. Like, it was all of that, and
That's
it was
awesome.
a truly magical place.
That is so cool. That's awesome. Wow. So you had that experience, which is good. You're learning, and then you're working in theater. And then what came first? Is it working on AGT?
I Yes,
Yeah.
it was interesting because AGT was I worked on AGT twice. The first time was I didn't know the designers. They were coming from LA, and they were holding interviews because obviously they needed assistants who knew the city, knew all the sourcing and everything here. And I was one of those people that had kind of the hybrid because AGT, when you're doing the contestants' clothing, because we weren't styling the judges, it was all for the contestants.
Mhm.
And so, although it is a TV show, it is live. So it is more live performance and theater like than anything else. And that, our schedule, like we would figure out who was eliminated and we would start the next day, and Daniela and Stephen would design it, and then we'd shop it and fit it. And, kind of we were working on the TV schedule, but we had, dress rehearsal and run throughs and kind of all of these things. So it was this really lovely hybrid of experiences. And the show that I had done before that on Broadway is I was one of the assistant designers on Spider-Man. And
Oh my
so,
gosh, really?
yes.
Was that
And
was that the first year when right? Didn't somebody fall? Right? Didn't Spider-Man fall?
yes, Chris
Yeah.
Chris did not loop into his safety cable, and
Oh
yes, he
my
did fall.
god.
Um, but I had done that production. And so it was one of the things that, because it was Marvel and because it was a comic book, it was like, great, you want to pick someone up by their toe? I know how to do that. You want to make someone smoke on stage? I know how to do that. Like all of these things that I had seen and been a part of in that past year, I
Yeah.
could bring with me to the show.
Wow. Well, that's really cool. And then one movie that I think it's so silly, but it's so funny. The guy that I interviewed, he's now, since I talked to him, he worked on the Batman and he did the Penguin, like all the makeup with the
Hmm.
Penguin, and he won awards for it. This guy Mike Marino,
Yeah.
he's from Suffolk County. Yeah, movie 43. Like he's the one who did like the scene with Hugh Jackman.
Yep.
He
Yep.
he went to Hugh Jackman's house and had to like be like, hey, let's do the test makeup for putting these on your chin. And it's
Yeah.
like the movie's ridiculous, but it's so funny and it's cool. Your scene, the one you worked on was really cool. I'm still here. It's
That's
probably my
fine.
daughter trying to call me. But no, no, that's really neat that you had an opportunity to work on that movie because even that scene alone had a bunch of big names.
It did. It
Yeah.
did. And it was, again, I was the assistant for a friend who I went to grad school with. And she was like, "Are you interested?" I said, "Yes." And it was like shooting a short film. I think we did it in 4 or 5 days. I mean, it was fast. And you're like, "Okay, great," And at that point, I was still in grad school, and I was used to doing student films. So I was like, "Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
This is what we need to do." But it was a lot of fun.
So it's like they go to you, like when you're in that position, I know you have people do that now, but it's like, all right, I need blank, 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 and you have a list and you're just going out, especially if you're in the city, right?
Mhm.
Everything's kind of at your disposal.
Less so now. It
Oh, I'm
used to
sure. I'm
be.
sure it's totally different. Yeah.
Online shopping is a blessing and a curse. I mean, I
Yeah.
love not having to schlep 40 pairs of shoes anymore because I've done that.
Mhm.
But also with casting, sometimes you find out at 5:30 one night who is going to be playing the next morning at 7 a.m.
Oh,
And you've
yeah.
you've got to have something for that person.
So how do you prepare for that? Is it just buying like, okay, we know that the character's gonna wear like a cream sweater. Do you buy like every size that it
It's
could
not.
be?
No, because oftentimes, I mean, designs, and I can only speak to how I work
Yeah,
because
yeah.
it's all very individual. But no, I mean, a lot of the design is based upon the person playing that role.
Yeah.
If there are times where you're like, okay, this person is an older grandmother figure. And you're like, okay, great. I can start into that realm.
Yeah.
But, the scale of, if you're doing a print, if this person is very petite, then she can't wear something that someone who's taller could wear. So it, we really try and advocate for not having late casting.
Yeah.
But sometimes things happen. And in that case, you better have a good stock, and you better know what's open late and have overtime approved.
Oh man. No, that's I just think of how chaotic it could be. Like situations like, okay, we need this size now. And it's like we have to have this by yesterday. And it's got to
I mean,
be such a crazy scenario. Like you said, how hard it probably is in the city. My wife did an internship for this photographer, and she got real lucky. Like 2 weeks since she worked there, it was like Tracy Morgan, Henry Winkler. It was all for
mhm,
this Comedians Against Cancer book. So for Tracy Morgan, she was like doing that kind of PA kind of stuff, and she had to go find a goldfish because he wanted and a goldfish bowl, and she held it in front of his face, and it's like just thinking that. I remember her calling me. She's like, I don't know. They just told me I have to go get a goldfish. And she had to just walk out, use her phone,
yep.
find the nearest pet store. But it's got to be an interesting process. So now when you get a script, because we'll go, obviously, like around this time, a big deal happens, like the Americans, which we'll talk to about in a second. But when you are laying out the script, like you said, you have that book and you learned it in school, like how does the whole design of what you think of the character look like? Because I'm sure, obviously, there's description in the script that says like Tony, blue shirt, black jeans. Like, is it right away? You're like, this is what I think, and then you sketch something, and then show to somebody, be like, what do you think? How does that process work?
I mean, it really depends on the
I'm sure with
project
different
and
directors and different, yeah,
different
yeah,
director. Yeah,
yeah. That's
and
true.
also, do I have a relationship with that person, or is it the
Hmm.
first time I'm working with them? But to your point, even if blue shirt and black jeans is written into the script, I mean, is it a blue shirt and a black jeans from Old Navy?
Yeah,
Is it a $300 bamboo, very drapey blue shirt and
yeah.
a
That's
pair
true.
of
Yeah.
designer black jeans?
That's what I mean.
Or
Yeah, it's so
like,
open ended. So it's like you have to probably read. Obviously, hopefully, the script. If the script's getting made, I'm sure it's more detailed than that. There's some kind of character description that you can go by, but it just seems like it's one of those things that, like you said, relationships are key. If you know the director's like, "Hey, Katie, I trust you. I know you're gonna," and then you could start that process of like, "Oh, this is what I think it's gonna look like." And then be able to start. But it's so crazy to think about just that whole process, like because you're not only designing like picking out the clothes that the character's going to wear, but then it has to be like fit on the character. So there's all these different things that go into that. Just crazy. What would you say is like like a difficult? Obviously, all of it I'm sure is difficult at times, but would you say that there's one part of the process that it's like no matter what, there's always some kind of not a pitfall, but what would you say the hardest part of like that structure is from like script to getting it into a scene?
I I mean, for me, episodic TV is the most difficult because once you start shooting, you are simultaneously shooting one script and prepping another. And
Yeah.
oftentimes it's not just one because everyone is either block shooting or crossboarding. So you're working on two scripts and prepping two or sometimes three all at the same time. And so trying to be able to be in fittings and meetings and doing your paperwork that you need to do and give, your eye to the people who are shopping so that way you can give them feedback on what they're bringing you and say like, yes, more of this or no, let's go in this direction.
Yeah.
Uh, I always start by doing visual research boards. It doesn't matter if it's set contemporaneously or if it's in 1865. Like, I always do visual research for the exact reason we were just talking about like,
Yeah.
what blue shirt and black jeans do I have in my mind?
Hmm.
Because I want to make sure that we're all talking about the same thing because my goal is that I don't want anyone to be surprised when the costume shows up on set. I want everyone to be like, "Oh yeah, okay, we know what this is," and
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
then there won't be any problems, or there will
Yeah.
be maybe not, but then the likelihood is much lower that there will be problems.
Yeah.
And so making sure that everyone is on the same page visually is key, and if it is a team whom I haven't worked with before, figuring out who really has the final say in whether something goes or not, because that's a whole different structure depending on what studio you're working for. I mean, sometimes it's one person, sometimes it's two, sometimes it's literally a team of people,
Yeah, I'm sure.
and you have to get them all to sign off on it. And so figuring out the visual language of those people, what they respond to, and going from there is always the most difficult.
Yeah. Man. So how does the Americans come about? Like we talked about, you're doing the AGT. That's kind of like the live
Mhm,
theater that you're accustomed to. You do like the little, like the 4 or 5 days movie 43. And then right around
mhm.
that time, there's other things like Shrek the Musical, which is nuts. I didn't even know that was a musical.
It was the live performance, I believe, that they filmed is what that one is
Oh my
counting,
God.
and
Was it
I worked.
everybody was in costume? Everybody?
Mm, mhm.
I gotta,
There, yeah, they did, yeah, Shrek was on Broadway for many years, and
wow.
yeah,
All right. And
yep,
it looks like Shrek, like in green, and the donkeys that I was trying to think like when
yep,
SpongeBob did his, it was just a guy that
yeah,
really wasn't a sponge.
yeah. No, this was
They went full. Okay.
they went full Shrek, and yeah,
That's great.
I'm
Uh,
sure there are lots of pictures online for you.
I got to check it out. My kids love Shrek, so maybe.
Oh,
But yeah, so the
there you go.
Americans. So
Mhm.
how does that? Was that another connection from school or somebody you worked with on a recent project?
It was a connection from school. This was the time when I had really decided I wanted to switch into film and TV. And so I sent a message to anyone and everyone I knew that who was working in film and TV, including one of my girlfriends, Courtney McLean, who I'd gone to NYU with. And I said, "Look, I don't care if I have to get coffee, like whatever. I'm happy to do it, but I know that this is where I'd like to be." And so she was assisting Jenny Gehring on a production that was shooting in New Orleans, and I did a couple of days shopping in New York for them and shipping stuff down. And so then later, when Jenny was designing the first season of The Americans, they had a very big background day coming up. And so they needed an additional shopper and an additional person on the day to help dress everyone and get everyone ready, approved before we shot. And so she had her first, Deirdre, give me a call. And so I came and I did those 3 days. And then I joke that I just never left.
You just stayed. Nah, I'm gonna
I
stay.
just stayed.
Yeah.
I mean, those 3 days turned into I was approved to be the additional shopper for each episode. Um, that first episode that I worked on was about halfway through the first season, and so I did the remaining episodes. And then when the show went to hiatus, the first ACD took a job with someone else, which is very normal. It's all freelance.
Oh yeah.
So it's about who's available at what time.
Mhm.
And so then when it got renewed, she wasn't available. And so she recommended that I be the assistant to Jenny, and Jenny accepted and hired me. And so I was her assistant costume designer for seasons 2 and 3. And then after the third season, Jenny decided that she wanted to go back to features, which is where she had been before that. And so she put my name forward for taking over. And I went through cast and studio approval. And
Wow.
then I was approved. And
So
so then
cool.
I took over season 4.
That is awesome. From saying I'll do anything, coffee, whatever,
Yep.
to the background. I think that's got to be so difficult too. Is like the continuation of like the clothing for everyone, because that's so hard and that's something that people spot so much when you're watching a movie, when it's like, oh, that cup wasn't full or something with like a shirt. But I think in a scene when you have so many people in a background, it just seems like so much. Obviously, like period. more difficult just because of getting the costumes, or no? There's so much of it out there.
It depends. It depends on what period it is. In some ways, period is a bit easier because nobody thinks they're an expert on it. And
Yeah, that's true.
so when you show them your research, you're like, this is what it looks like. They're like, okay, sure. But if you're doing a modern dress show, then everyone gets dressed on their own in the morning. And so there are a lot of people who have opinions about what something should be or shouldn't be. So it really, I mean, again, there are some periods that are more difficult in terms of being able to find or build things. Um, there are some modern some modern dress shows where you're like, my kingdom for a pair of cream pants, and you can't find them anywhere, and you end up having to
Yeah.
build them anyways. So
No, that's true. Like, it's not like somebody's gonna be watching and be like, "Yeah, they didn't wear that in 1725."
exactly.
They're not gonna.
I mean,
Nobody's gonna really
there are
know
those
that.
people though.
I'm sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, that's really cool. That's so cool that you went from that, and then, hey, now season 4, like, you're running it, and that's pretty good. So you have to go through cast approval. So the cast has
I
to.
did.
Wow. What's the whole process like? Is it just getting interviewed by them, or?
No, I mean, largely it was behind the scenes. I don't know exactly what all
Oh,
happened.
okay.
I was just told by our line producer, and she said, Jenny recommended you. We all think it's a fantastic idea.
Cool.
Here is the process. And so I know they spoke to Carrie and Matthew and Noah, but I don't know how far down the cast list they went. And I did have to pass studio muster. So but again, I don't know who all,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
on the FX side had say.
Well, that's just cool to think about. Like, obviously you're in this, but to think it's like, oh yeah, Carrie Russell. Oh, Carrie. It's like Katie. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's cool. That's cool just to think about, even though it's probably not like that. But it's like, yeah, that's neat. So that's so cool. What an opportunity to be able to do that. And then from there, it's like, all right, and you have like shows like The Enemy Within, Hit
Mhm.
and Run, Suspicion. So I think it's one of those things like, it's momentum, right? Because as soon as you have something out there, no matter what, if it's in front of the camera or behind the camera, which yours is kind of interesting because it's both. Because obviously
Mhm.
there's so much that goes into what people see when they see somebody that you dressed on the set, but just to get it to that point, there's so much that goes into it. But once you have something, you'd be like, oh yeah, the Americans, and you could show something that's such a big, and that's awesome. It's really cool.
It's a lot of fun. And the thing I joke about is now I'm kind of your spy niche. It's like if you need someone who works FBI, CIA disguises, because that's the through line on my career.
Yeah,
Every single
yeah.
one of those shows is, hey, if you've got to get put into a box, I love that one.
That's so interesting how that happens
Mhm.
for all types of jobs. You have somebody that's like, "Oh
Everything.
yeah, you're always a cop." Like, this
Yep.
guy is always going to be a detective, a cop, just yeah, that's but that's, hey, better to get called than no calls, but that's so cool. And it's so great that you're able to use that, like at this point it's auditioning for gigs, like, you hear, "Oh, the Enemy Within is hiring," and you're like, "All right," because do you have an agent or everything is all
Do.
you? Okay.
No, I do have an agent. My and you like everything, it's all about who you know and keeping
Of
up
course.
connections and calling and emailing and reading the trades and having all of your Google alerts set so that way if someone you've worked with signs a new deal and it's announced it's all of that.
That's really smart. Yeah, that's good.
But no, but yes, it's one of those, there's my agent will call me and say, there's a project coming up and, we'd like to pitch you for it. I immediately go to IMDb to see who I know who's working on it, or
Yeah.
who I know who knows someone who's working
Yeah,
on it,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
to get, references and that kind of, or, I someone I know says, "Hey, I'm working on this." And I'm like, "Great, I'm interested." And then I loop in my agent.
So what is the audition process like when you go for like that interview for a show? Are you getting a script beforehand to be able to get everything and be able to show like, oh, this is what I would think? Is that how that goes?
Most of the time, yes. It really depends on the project and the showrunners, obvious on kind of what they want to see. Usually I get at least one script. If it is a series, sometimes I'll get two or three. Sometimes they're sequential, sometimes they're over the course. So you get an arc idea in terms of what's happening with those
Okay.
characters. And then I put together my boards. Basically, I design it. I do my first pass without any, you know, feedback pass of designing it. And sometimes, I mean, I've had as little as 24 hours to do it. I've had as much as about a week and a half to do it. And obviously, however in depth they are is dependent upon how quickly I've had to do them. But
Yeah.
then, it's like any interview. It's talking, it's getting the feel for the people, and if you vibe, if you feel that you can work well together, and then presenting my ideas.
Have you ever, because obviously it'd be great for everyone to bat 1,000, but that's not how show business is.
Oh,
Have you ever done an audition? Because I think this is like other jobs, like normal people jobs. Like I'm an accountant. I don't think I would ever go into a job interview as an accountant and then they be like, so what do you think of our company? Or like, what do you think are some ideas? Like, there's never anything that I would do. Maybe some jobs are if you're somebody going in to be like, to head some kind of project or some advertising. That's the only
mhm.
thing that I can see blending over. But I've just talked to so many people before, especially writers, and they're like, yeah, I pitched this idea. I didn't get the job. And then I see the movie 3 years later and my idea's in the movie. Has something like that happened before? Obviously, some can be like a coincidence, but has that happened?
That has not happened to me. So, but I feel like I need to preface that by saying yet,
Yeah,
because,
yeah,
and I
yeah.
don't, I don't think it's malicious. Giving
Oh,
people
I
the
don't think I
benefit of
think it's
the
them saying,
doubt.
"Oh my god, I love this idea. I can't get this out of my head." But
Right.
the next person that came in, or the person after, maybe like you said, vibing is such a big thing. Like people can
Yeah.
hire the best person in the world, but if you don't want to work with that person and you have to work with them closely for so long,
Yeah.
you're not going to get hired. You know?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so, no, I mean, there are, I will say, a couple of jobs that I've interviewed in the not so distant past that I didn't get. And I'm interested to see when the productions come out, because there are a
Yeah.
couple things that got some really good responses from the people that were interviewing me. And I'm like, I wonder if that stays.
Yeah, and I feel like it's such a process. It's almost like obviously you have to have a script out there, but I feel like there's such a big amount of brainstorming that can happen by the producers or if there's a director already attached. But there's so much that can change from the movie, and it just I don't know. I think the people should get something for it if it's ever like, oh yeah, yeah, your idea. I'm sure there's been lawsuits for like scripts or things like that. But I think that's so interesting because obviously you're interviewing somebody for a job, but you're interviewing for a job, but you want what they would do with the job. So they're presenting ideas based on just the words that are on the paper.
This is something actually that was addressed in the last contract negotiations,
Really?
both with local 892, the Costume Designers Guild, and in USA 829, which is the East Coast equivalent. And there is language because a large number of times we would be required to send our decks to the producers or
Oh,
to people,
yeah.
and then they would just have them. And so best practices now is you do not send it to anyone. You present it, you share your screen and present it. They obviously can see it,
Yeah,
but
sure. Snap photos.
but
Snap
they don't.
photos.
Right. Well, and like, of
Yeah, yeah.
course,
Yeah.
yes, people can screen grab, but they have begun to lay foundation for internet or for intellectual property.
That's so smart. That's great that they're doing that because I even like rewriting the scripts. I talked to people that it's like, yeah, they made us do it like 40 times, and it's like that's insane. And you're
Yes,
getting paid that
script
one amount.
revisions.
So if you're getting a check for 40 grand, like it's really $1,000 a script, and you spent a lot of time doing that, which I understand in a way, but then it's like all that other time wasted. I know you have the job, but there's a lot of time that you're doing the same thing over and over and over again. But that's really cool that you mentioned that that is language put into the new contract because that is just something I think about because it's like why wouldn't somebody take that idea? It's not like you can. It's such a weird thing because if somebody told me a great idea it's just like, oh, man, I don't know that I can't get this out of my head. I love the way Kate had the hat, the design for the hat of the main character. I wouldn't have thought of that, but this other guy had this great idea for the henchman's outfits. It's like one of those
Hmm.
things. What do you do?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Oh man. So this has been so much fun because I told you I think I said in the email, like when I started this like 6 years ago now. And I always
Hmm.
said like it'd be fun to talk to everyone on set. And you're the first person in costumes that I've talked to. So in the beginning, obviously, like your first big kind of thing when you worked at the Henson Mansion, was there any mementos that you kept along the way? Like the Americans like scripts or things that you kept?
I do have things, yes, I have things from projects that I've designed. Usually when we wrap, uh, there's a whole system for tracking the costumes and
I'm
all of
sure,
that kind
yeah.
of thing. I'm sure other people have spoken to you about assets, which are basically anything you've purchased over a certain monetary amount has to be tracked with the studio, and it's trying to prevent people from stealing things.
Yeah.
Um, but at the end, when you wrap a show and you know it's not coming back, oftentimes, either they will want to sell things off. We often do costume sales or things like that. And so there have been some times where I've gotten things like that. Like I have the cyanide locket that that I had made for Elizabeth for that last season of The
Wow.
Americans. I have that.
That's rad.
And I have what else do I? I'm trying to think. I have a couple of other things. Oh, I have some of the things from Hit and Run. I have a dress that we bought multiples of that we didn't end up using that couldn't be, I mean, it was from Spain and we couldn't return it. And so there are bits and pieces of things like that. One of my favorite things from Manhunt is there are sections of costumes that got cut.
Yeah.
And so just, like this is a panel of the fabric that we didn't end up using or things like that,
That's neat.
which are really cool.
Yeah, no, that's really cool because some people don't think of not taking things, but you know what I mean? Like having that memory.
Hmm.
Obviously, it's more. I've talked to people that started in like the 70s and 80s, and they're like, "Yeah, I never kept anything. I never really thought of it." Like, because obviously now it's so different. Like we have cell phones, but to have like a tangible thing like even that, like you mentioned, like the piece of fabric or like the locket, like the cyanide locket. So so has there ever been something that was difficult to put together, like something like that would have like a very specific look and is a very important thing for the character? Has there been something that was like hard to design or not get right for you, but get right for the person that was
Oh,
making that call?
oh no, I will fully take the blame. Yeah, no, there have been a number of times.
Yeah.
Again, and the cyanide locket, was something that the Jays, Joe and Joel, had written in, and we would see it, I think, in like the second or third episode of the that final season, and it played the entire time. And it was something that just needed to look like a beautiful necklace and conceal, a cyanide pill. And so I worked with props. I was like, are we talking tablet, capsule? Like, what are how big are we talking? And I went through all of these different locket designs. This was the beginning of 3D printing really being available. I was like, great, we'll have something 3D printed. Went through like four of those kind of iterations, never got it. And so then I began looking back I through, and this is where tangible media is something that I love because the internet is fantastic if you know what you're looking for.
Yeah.
But if you don't know and you really just need to browse, I was flipping. And so I think I got one of like the Sears catalogs or one of the catalogs from like 1986. And I was just looking at the jewelry. I was like, what is something that I think I could hide? And I came across this opal pendant. And I was like, yeah, because the opal is the stone. And so you won't see behind it. It's not clear. And I know someone who creates jewelry. And so I called him up and I said, could you fabricate a hollow opal where the back, set in sterling silver and where the back would slide open for us? And he did like six prototypes of us trying to figure out what the right combination was for it to really read as an opal. And finally, we got it right. And when the Jays saw that one after the whole, they're like, yes, that's it. And we're like, okay, great, we got it. And I was like, let's make three of them. So that way, if something happens, we've got it. But
What a
no, I
cool
mean,
way to find it, like a Sears catalog.
well,
That's
again,
smart.
it's one of those, sometimes it's like, I love the picture collection at the New York Public Library because sometimes you don't know what you're looking for and you really just need to stumble across something before you realize how perfect it is.
Yeah. Man, Sears, man. Oh my God. I can't believe that. I used to go back to school shopping there. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh! And now I watched a movie on YouTube the other day, and it had all the commercials. It was Angels in the End Zone, and it
Uh-huh.
had all the commercials because it's not for some reason it's a Disney movie that is not on Disney or anywhere. But the
Uh-huh.
commercials in it were so nostalgic. Because I don't know what year
Mhm.
did you graduate? I'm guessing like 2001 high school
Uh, no,
ish.
from high school, 1997.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. No, I was trying to think the timing wise. So yeah, so this
Yeah.
is again like right around that same time because I think the movie came out in
Yeah.
'97, but like there was like a Sears catalog and they were trying to like rebrand, and it was like in the commercial was all about like it was all women models like showing off their earrings and
Yep.
dresses, and I'm like, oh my, this isn't the Sears I remember. Remember the Sears
Yep.
that was like the they would have like the tools and then there'd be like kids toys like or kids outfits like right across the way, but that's a really cool story to find what you're looking for in a place that why not, like you said, just flipping through a tangible thing that you could feel.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, it's one of those going back and just flipping and being able to be struck by something or be surprised by it
Yeah.
is really valuable.
So you mentioned the number three before. Is that usually for like a lead actor, like the main principal? If you know, like, all right, they're always gonna wear this shirt or something. How many of them do you buy to be safe?
That really depends. I'll give you two extremes.
Okay.
For jewelry, I always want at least doubles because there will be a stunt double, there will be a body double, there will be, an earring will fall off and we will not be able to find it, whatever. In terms of shirts if there was a stunt sequence, personally, I like four, one to stay clean and three to burn through. So you have three takes to do whatever you need to do with it. Um, but for something like Manhunt, where who played John Wilkes Booth, was in the same costume for about 90% of the series. We shot it over 7 months, 6 months, and I think I had 18 shirts made for him because of shooting outside in Savannah in the summer. Like the
uh,
man might want just a clean shirt after lunch.
Yeah.
But also just the period of degradation that it had to go through in our story. We would have like, this many were aged to look this way, this many
Oh
were aged to
yeah,
look
that's
this
true. Yeah.
way. Same shirt, but it's like how much sweat, how much ring around the collar, have they tromped through the mud yet? Like all of those types of things, but also just wear and tear. If you wear the same three shirts over 7 months and your story is only meant to take place over 12 days,
Yeah.
those shirts are not going to look good at the end of 7 months.
That's
So you have
true.
to space out the wear.
How do you figure out like the wear of a shirt? Is that just something from doing this for so long, or is there some reference of like, all right, I need this shirt to look like it's been worn for 7 days? Is it just something you based on your eye or your feel?
Kind of you work with the production designer and the director and the showrunner to kind of get the feeling as to what is clean and what is dirty, because clean is never bright white on film.
Yeah.
And so it's like, what level are we starting at and what level are we ending at? Like, how bad do you really want it to be at the very end?
Yeah.
And then I can go through and work in between.
So I think I know the answer to this question, uh, but oh, maybe not. So if you look back, obviously this is something that you wanted to do and you're destined to do. You know, when you're picking out your fabric and your mom's sewing the Halloween costumes, which I think is so cool. Uh, were there any other career choices? Like I know obviously they wanted you to go for something different. Like what was that conversation like? I didn't ask you about that. When you told
I
them
mean,
like, guys, I'm full bore going this
well,
direction.
in fairness to my parents, they saw that I was doing more theater classes than I
Yeah.
was biology. So they knew which way it was
Yeah, yeah,
trending.
yeah, yeah.
Um, but I mean, I really had wanted to be a research biologist for NASA. That's what I wanted to do. I didn't want to be an astronaut to go into space to do spacewalks or anything, but I wanted to be able to do experiments in space. And so when the time came and I had taken my costume design class and I'd really chosen it, and I told my mom, I was like, I'm going to be a costume designer. My mom said, can you make a living at that? And I mean, in fairness to her, there was, she didn't have anyone that she knew who did that.
Yeah.
Everyone in Memphis who was a costume designer also taught or, did something else. It was not a sole job for them. Um, and I responded, I was like, if I'm good at it and I live in the right place, yes, I can. Um, so thankfully, I, my career so far has shown that I'm in the right place, and I like to think I'm pretty good at what I do.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I think the full circle moment would be if you were able to work on a movie about space.
That would
I
be
know there's
amazing.
been a ton of like the 60s and 70s era, but
Hmm.
there's gotta be so many other stories that have not been told about
Yeah.
like the one about the guy, the first guy, the Russian guy, right? The first guy that went up.
Mhm.
They talked
Yep.
about like he became like a full-blown alcoholic because
Yeah.
they wouldn't let him do what he loves. They just paraded him around like, "Hey, look at this great thing." And I'm like, "Why has that never been a movie?" Like that story is pretty wild. Like you get to the pinnacle of what you want to do. It's like if Patrick Mahomes won his first Super Bowl and they were like, "You're not playing football anymore, man. You're going to go around the world with your trophy and show people your trophy." It's just such an interesting thing. And I don't know where I heard it. It was on, I think it was on a comedy podcast. They were talking about it. And I was like, you know
Hmm.
what? That is like one story that they don't teach you in school.
Yeah. No,
But
that's true.
yeah, that's really neat. This has been so much fun. I just I hope my questions weren't too like general, but I think it's just such a fascinating part of the millions of things that go around behind the scenes before something goes on. Like whether it's a stunt that takes, it's insane how much goes into like one shot because the thing that the costume that you're designing for the stuntman in a scene this could be like a stunt that's been planned for 3 months that is really only 30 seconds of camera time or film
Or
time.
not even.
Yeah, or it gets cut. Yeah. No, I
Yep.
know, it's crazy.
Yeah.
I talked to a
Yeah.
helicopter pilot, and he did a scene in the Netflix Extraction 2. He
Mhm.
practiced landing on a train. At first it was just a pretend kind of thing. He did it for I think 3 or 4 months. The day of filming, it was like too windy, and they weren't even able to do what so he had to like improvise and do something that wasn't what was,
Yeah.
and it's just crazy to think about how much goes into things that don't even make it onto camera. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And I'm sure
Oh,
you're
yeah.
like, you're loving like going to get a specific thing, but it's like, oh my God, like I spent weeks looking for those shoes, and you cut the scene where you zoom in on the shoes or something like that, you know?
You've gotta just let it go because you
Yeah,
yeah.
totally.
No, but yes, shooting changes, like, yeah, it happens all the time.
Yeah, man. So did you have a genre that you'd love to work in if you had your choice?
I love sci-fi, and I
Yeah,
have never worked in sci-fi. I would
that'd be
love
cool.
to, if anyone's listening,
Yeah, no, that'd be awesome. Oh man. Well,
but,
Katie, thank you so much. I'm so happy we connected. How do you like New Jersey versus do you miss Memphis?
I mean, I haven't lived in Memphis since I was 18,
Oh, that's
so
true, yeah.
I've been, I've
Oh,
I've
you've
been
been
up here
here more
for
than there now, right? Yeah.
yeah, I have. I lived in I lived in New York for almost 20 years before
Oh,
I moved
okay.
to Jersey. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So, no, it's all good.
You have no accent anymore. Or did you ever have an accent?
My dad was from upstate New York and
Oh.
had a very specific belief about people's preconceived notions of women with Southern accents. And so my dad was very strict about making sure that my sister and I spoke properly and everything. But yeah, I mean, also, I trained as an actor before
Yeah, that's
costume
true, yeah.
design, so you kind of get rid of it at that point.
Wow. So you just didn't have it, or it was just like it would come out and he'd be like, "All right, can you say?"
Well, it's the difference in pin and pen and tin
Yeah,
and ten and, that kind of thing. And I'm sure that if I get tired, I'm sure I sound a little more
it slips,
Southern,
yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah.
Oh man, well, thank you so much. When
So
this comes out, I'll shoot you an email with the link or whatever, and I'll put all the links to your website. Which your website's cool. I think that's so awesome
thank
because
you.
nowadays, really, like business cards, like it's like to give somebody a
Yeah.
business card. It's just like I feel like what are they gonna do with it? Because that's how I feel. If somebody gives me something, I'm like, I think
Yeah.
immediately I'm gonna lose this. So it's always
Yeah.
good to have like a website, and then I always forget to tell people. I'll be talking to somebody and be
Well,
like, "Oh yeah, you have a podcast," and I'd be like, "Oh yeah," and then I'm telling them like, "Why don't I?" Or I just need the QR code. I'm sure
I
you're
was gonna say
prepared.
do the
I know I
QR
got to do
code and
that.
then
Yeah,
you can do it.
no, I can do it. Yeah, I can do it.
You can do
All
it.
right, well, thank you. This has been so much fun. Katie was awesome. I love how the finding of the cyanide necklace. So neat to be able to figure out like, oh, flipping through here, and that's where you get your inspiration. I think that's so cool, and I thought it was so cool when I talked about, hey, I wasn't expecting the answer. I think that's what was so great about it. Oh, what, since you're in costume, does it like ruin you watching a show? And I'm thinking when she brings up Stranger Things, she's going to be saying, oh yeah, because that watch came out in 89 and the show's in 85, which you see on like IMDb goofs all the time. But no, hers was like, oh, I could tell that's not the main outfit. That's like a backup. And I'm like, whoa, like she could tell that the quality went down to be like, all right, it's okay. Maybe if this gets ripped, we're fine. So it's like one of those backup ones. So that was so cool. Katie, thank you so much. And your homework, folks, which is amazing homework. This movie's got Ashanti as Dorothy in that character. I haven't seen this movie. I remember it was on like ABC on like a Saturday night, and I just didn't watch it. But I do remember it, and I remember the box cover art, which is so cool. But yeah, it's online. I don't know if it's on Disney Plus But I'll make sure to add that in the episode notes when I got better internet when I go inside. But yeah, so don't forget to review, rate, share our podcast. Follow us on all social media at Sequels Only. And don't forget to check out our website, sequelsonly.com. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, guys.